Well, good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is today is August 5th with the Research Triangle PowerShell Group. We're so happy that you've taken the time to join us this evening. We're also super excited to have Stephen Valdinger, also known as Steviecoaster, and he's going to give us the lowdown on basically Selenium. So take it away, Stevie.
All right. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here and talk to you guys and hang out. I thoroughly enjoy being here. So thank you. As the slide says, my name's Stephen Valdinger. I work for Chocolatey Software as a senior support engineer, and I have seriously drank the PowerShell Kool-Aid over the past couple of years. I absolutely love it. And I also enjoy helping folks across the globe with their software application life cycles as my day job. It's pretty awesome. My GitHub link is on there, github.com/Steviecoaster. I will have a tweet sent out after the event tonight with the GitHub repository for all of the stuff that we're going to go through. If you want a refresher or just to check out the code later at your leisure, that'll be available to you via Twitter later. Social media at Steviecoaster. You can find me on Slack, Discord, Twitter, LinkedIn, pretty much everywhere. It's at Steviecoaster. Pretty easy to find. And the one thing I don't have on the slide that I'm noticing just now is my blog, steviecoaster.dev. I blog very infrequently, but there is some information out there if Azure pipelines and CI/CD, DevOpsy, PowerShell type stuff is your shtick. I've got a couple of blog articles out there about that stuff. But tonight, the focus is going to be on testing web frameworks with Selenium. And for those of you who don't know what Selenium is or why you would even need it, Selenium is basically a framework used to test web application functionality or to automate things that happen via a browser. It's not just PowerShell centered. You can absolutely run Selenium tests in Java, in C#, in PowerShell. The library is available and drivers are available for a vast array of languages. So if you're coming here just because you're interested in Selenium, that's great. But because this is a PowerShell user group and I write PowerShell as my day job, I'm going to be using the Selenium PowerShell module and writing Selenium tests in pure PowerShell. And again, the why, you might want to validate changes for your web application. Say you're a web dev, your company writes a application that's delivered as a web app, and you need to unit test that thing every time you make a change and release a new version. Similar things when you want to load test. How well does this thing react if I send a million requests to it? Where does it start to fall over? How do I scale this web application cleanly? Selenium can help you with that. Or if you're like me in the last bucket, you're lazy and you just don't want to do something, and you can write some PowerShell code to tell Selenium to do it and make it click the buttons in the browser and go where it needs to go. You can absolutely do that as well. But there are some gotchas. Selenium is very finicky and fragile and profanity inducing. I guarantee you that a test you write for Selenium today will not work at some point in the future, and it will come down to something weird, like it took 2 milliseconds longer to load one time than it did the other time, and that made your test fail. So you will run into weird things with timings, other things like that with Selenium. That's just par for the course. There, I've said my warning. I'm covered. But it is extremely rewarding when you're done. After you have all your web testing written, all your Selenium tests are good. In the examples tonight, you'll see some pester tests. Once you see all those green lines flying by, you're like, yes, this is good. It's bourbon hour. Great. And with that, we're going to jump right into demos. And before we get started, this talk is going to be quite a bit concept intensive. We'll see a bunch of Selenium as well, but I want to make sure that for you guys that don't really know what you would really use this for, some of the tooling and concepts around web frameworks in general that you have at your disposal to be able to use this really effectively. And the first thing I want to talk about is just the HTML code itself. So HTML code, when you load up a browser, you get something called a DOM, or the directory object model. What you can think about that as is similar to a PowerShell object in that you've got an object, and an object can have properties, methods, and events tied to it. It's similar with HTML. You've got an HTML object that has all of these different objects within it, and those objects can have properties like this H1 is an H1 object, and its property is the fact that it's some text that says, "Hi, I'm Stephen." Similarly, properties of that H1 can be something like this div, for example. It's got an ID, and its ID is an example. So once you grasp that concept, you can take a step back and really look at this thing called an Xpath. And an Xpath, if we take a look at any website, if we just launch Chrome, for example, and go to Google, if I can type this evening, we right click anywhere on here and we just say inspect. We're going to spend a lot of time staring at this screen right here, the developer console of Google Chrome tonight, because there's some really, really great tools built right into the browser that can help you write your Selenium tests more effectively. And one of the things that I really like to do is click this little button here and then highlight over anything and just click it. And what that's going to do is take you right into the DOM
Hey,
where
Stevie.
yeah.
I'm gonna guess that maybe someone's gonna ask us to bump that up a little bit. That's a little small.
Yeah, let's attempt to do that here.
It doesn't do it on the developer.
Oh, hold on. I have to do it. I think I have to do it. Can I do it here?
If you can, it's not a big deal.
Let me see if I can't make it at least a little more readable here. I don't think I can zoom this in.
How about you set the VM to scale? So change the scaling on the VM.
Yeah, that screws with this really bad. I can try it. Let me try it. There, that's a little better.
Cool.
Better.
Thanks, brother.
Yep, no problem. Now, how do I get this back over here a little bit so I can see what I'm doing? There we go. So I'm going to click this little arrow button and then just click on something in here. And
Hey,
that's
guys,
going to take me in the DOM directly.
It's all right, guys. I just want to say there is a way to blow up the size of that developer window. You just need to use on Windows, probably maybe Control and the plus key. On Mac, it's and then plus.
Will that work?
While you're in that control window, while you're in that developer,
Oh,
there you go.
yeah, look at that. Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
The
So one more
community
time.
comes to save the day.
One more time. I'm going to click that button, go right to the DOM, and I'm going to right click on it. And when you right click on it, you can see here's an attribute editor. You can make this say whatever you want right inside the browser, which is kind of fun, but not necessary. But if we click this copy item here and scroll down, you can see that we have a whole bunch of different items that we're able to copy out. And the one that I'm going to be interested in is the Xpath. And I'm going to use the full Xpath every time and not just the copy Xpath button. That's because Selenium, when you're testing with it, sometimes just using the shorthand Xpath can cause problems and cause a collision with another element that might be on the screen if you're running a website that's reactive to the size of the window, for example, and controls move around. The XPath is not as reliable as the full XPath in relation to the DOM. So I like to use the full XPath as an example. And when we paste this in here, what you'll get is this weird looking thing that looks like this. And this basically says from this root in the body object inside of this div, there's another group of divs and the third one. So it would be like, if we look at this in a more holistic view here, it would be something like HTML, and then a body, and then a div, and then inside of that, there's going to be 3 divs, basically. And these are going to look a little funny the way they're lined up. But if we blow these back out like this, so it's just basically indexing into an array of those divs. So grab the 4th one in this example, since it's 0-based. And then inside of that, there's a form. Go into that. Go into the 2nd div or the 3rd div of the next group of divs, 2nd, so on and so forth, until you get to the input button, and it's the 2nd input button in that group of input buttons. So that's kind of how you read an XPath tree. It looks a little convoluted, and it kind of is. But once you understand that it's just a hierarchy of walking down the different nodes inside of a DOM, it gets a little easier to understand what exactly you're looking for. And if I were to come back here and say copy and see just the XPath and paste that in, you can see how the shorthand is a little more difficult to parse, and it's not as definite, I guess is a good word for it. So that's more or less getting started with DevTools. You've got a lot of the tooling that you need right at your fingertips to get started with this. The developer tools inside of Chrome are amazing. I highly recommend you use them to check this stuff out. And I think all modern browsers, Chrome, Edge, Firefox, they all have some version of this that has the same functionality. And if you don't like this view, you can also click this button and move this around if you want it like in the bottom or whatever. It's customizable. So the first script we're going to look at that I'll have available in the repo, and I'm just going to get rid of this for now. This is a bootstrap script that will be up in the repo that will help you install everything you need to get started with playing with this. Because I work for Chocolatey, I'm going to make you drink the Choco Kool-Aid as well and install all of these tools with Choco. The first one being just a PowerShell module, the Selenium module from the gallery, and then this will get you a VS Code, the PowerShell extension, Google Chrome, and the Selenium Chrome driver all in one script. And this is relatively idempotent. Like if you've done this before, if you've already got Choco, it's not going to put Choco back on your system. It's just going to skip it. And same with these. If you've already got these installed as Chocolatey packages, it'll just no-op them. So no harm, no foul. So it is officially demo time. We're going to be using this website called theinternet.herokuapp.com. And it is a great site for playing around with Selenium. There are all kinds of different testing scenarios that have been baked into that page that are very simple in nature that allow you to target doing different things with Selenium, just so you get your feet under you a little bit as you're getting started with this stuff. So I'm just going to run this first region here, and I'm going to grab all of this stuff and right click and run selection. And what that's going to do is run a version of Chrome. There's this concept of a Chrome driver that is being used. And that's what that Chocolatey package installs. It installs a specific Chrome binary that the Selenium engine uses to launch its Chrome instance in. And if we look, let me just make sure that everything is running the way it should be. And it looks like it is. So I'm going to set my target to null, and then I'm going to run this navigation line. And as you can see in the background, that got passed to Selenium, and Selenium inside of this web browser loaded up the internet.herokuapp.com. And here's that full list of all the different things that you can test with Selenium. It's very, very extensive. The first thing we'll look at is forms. So I'm going to change over to the forms section of this page and run that guy. Hopefully. Come here. What are you doing? Did I not run that correctly? Why are you not running? Run. It broke. Why did it? Demo gods be damned. Hold on. Let me launch this over in an actual PowerShell window. Remember what I said about Selenium being profanity inducing? This is what I was talking about. There we go. I'm gonna kill this section of it and grab, oops, I'm gonna grab this line right here, oops, and not put it over there. Put it over here. Thank you. And grab this guy to go over here. And this guy. To go over here. There we go. This is going to be ugly if I can't get this to work the rest of the way like this. Let's put this over here. All right. So I'm going to grab just a quick username and password. Copy that and paste those two things over here. And then I'm going to do these one at a time and just run them and show you what comes back. So if we look at username element now, we get back this OpenQA Selenium Chrome driver object. You can see that it's an input. It doesn't have any text inside of it. And it tells you where on the page it is and how big it is, things like that. That's the element that we're going to interact with later when we go to click a button and fill things in, etc. So now that we have our username and password defined.
Let me ask you a question. At this point, you're just instantiating that Chrome browser at that point. So you're now, hey, I know what the page is. You just ran some stuff to go get the element back. So then later on, you're going to then use some of these elements to then actually put data back, submit forms.
Yep, exactly. So now when I type these two things in, you'll see username and password got filled in. And the next thing I did a little bit differently just to show that you can kind of string things together. And I used a short Xpath because I didn't want it to be super, super long here. We'll paste this over and we'll run that and we log in. So if we look at what that code actually just did as we went down through there, you can see that we've used several different commandlets as part of the Selenium module. This first commandlet, start SE Chrome, launched an instance of that Chrome WebDriver browser. There's also parameters that you can specify for this. You can run this headless. So if you were to run this headless, you wouldn't get that browser window opened. So if you're going to do this as part of like an automated CI/CD pipeline or some kind of background job where you're not going to have the visibility to see this window anyways, it can absolutely run headless. Also, if you have a very specific minimum and maximum window size that you want to run in, say you want to run at 1024 by 768 for whatever reason, You can absolutely do that. You can also tell it to just run a full screen, and it'll launch that browser full screen as well. There's a couple of different parameters as well. This quiet parameter will eliminate all this chatter that comes up when it gets started. Also, if you've got a different web driver, if you want to test against different versions of Chrome or whatever, you can say a web driver directory and specify exactly where those are. And also, you can say as default driver, and what that does is puts it in a global parameter that this is no longer needed to call on every single call. It's just going to use whatever is in that global variable from that point on. And there are also different ones for pretty much every browser. So if you look at start SE command here, there's Chrome, there's Edge, there's Firefox, there's Internet Explorer, there's Legacy Edge, New Edge. You can do it remotely. There's all kinds of different instantiations that you can use to test against different browsers. So you can have a suite of tests that you've written, say pester tests, and then you could have test cases that say, okay, run this iteration of tests against SE Chrome, and then run this iteration of tests against Firefox and Edge, and then give me all the results back. So you can have a full test across all browsers, what broke where.
Hey, Stevie, what's the start SE remote function?
I believe that is to target a remote instance. I've never had to use it before, so
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure.
Huh.
And I will tell you, caution, when you want to start using Selenium, there are no docs for this module. So you're kind of on your own to figure things out as you go along. It can be a little bit frustrating at times, but thankfully Google is really awesome, and if you can figure out how to do something in Selenium in another language, like find a C# example, it transfers over to the Selenium PowerShell module pretty well. For example, find SE element is alias for get SE element, and you can search by quite a few different things. So if you were to do get SE element, and we'll see this a little bit more in later examples, but you can say, well, what do I want to search by? And you can say something like, well, here's a class name, or maybe I want to search by ID, or maybe I want to search by tag name, or maybe I want to search by Xpath, and then my selection is, well, whatever that is. So if it's by Xpath, it's by whatever that Xpath is. And then the last thing on it, again, would be target or driver. They're alias together. I prefer driver because it's more clear what you're meaning there. And then that would just be your driver that you defined above. But like I said before, if you pass in when you start your driver, it's the default driver, you can drop this entirely and not use it at all. And what that's going to do is it's going to do functionally the same thing as this. Like I said, they're pretty much the same commandlet. And again, send SE keys does exactly what it says it's going to do. It types whatever keys you've given it into whatever element you told it to type into. Send SE clicks, same deal. What element do you want me to click on? I'm going to click on it. There is in a later example, there is the concept of a JavaScript click as well. So say there's some JavaScript on a page that like a page loads and a modal pops up, but there's a button behind that modal that you want to click on. A JavaScript click will reach behind the modal and click on that element for you. So it's really powerful in that regard as well, because sometimes you're testing a website and you've got like an acceptance page or something like that that you want to get out of the way first. Well, if you know the elements behind that and you don't want to mess with figuring out how to clear that out, you can just JavaScript click the elements behind it if you wanted to. Or you could write a test that does that, and if it works, you say, well, crap, that worked. I don't want that to work. And then you can go back and make those changes in your code. And the last thing to show you in this example is how you can work around jumping around frames. Frames are fun, to say the least. Let me make sure that that went to the right area. It probably didn't.
Hey Stevie, while you're talking,
Yeah.
I'll mention something. So Stevie helped me out with this thing where we have an internal application that we use for our service desk, and it uses SSO, single sign-on, with the logged in account. But my Chrome driver was logging in with my admin account, and so it would not work. And so I actually had to use Selenium and the modal click thing. I forgot what it's called, in order to authenticate using my non-admin credentials into the website that I was accessing. So that was the use case that I ran into that Stevie helped me out with, as an example.
So part of that example too is that, hey, if you have some, well, let's not use the word dinky, but some other web application, you could even, not so much even, Stevie's talking like testing, but not so much testing, but actually just automate, hey, I want to create a service ticket, that is an absolutely doable thing to do. And it's very valuable.
Yeah, we'll get into some of that stuff as well here in a minute. I just want to I want to expand this out, because doing this, it doesn't really show you very much, but watch this area here. As soon as I do that, you see how it like flipped me right to that frame. It put me inside of that frame top. And similarly, if I were to come over here and say I want to go here, it would switch me into this frame. And I'm going to minimize this out of my way and then run this. And this one might not show. Yeah, it did show it. So it switched me into this frame right here. So if there was anything interesting in here to grab, I'm now inside of that frame. I can get those elements. And if I wanted to back out from there, I could say switch SE frame, and I could go all the way back out to the top by just saying parent. And it doesn't like show it in the DOM when I switch back out to the parent. It's really annoying. But you're now back out of your frame. So if you need to go inside of your frame or outside of your frame, you absolutely could. Similarly, if you've got a web app that opens a separate window, you can absolutely do that as well. But that is that one. And I'm going to say stop SE driver at this point. Oops, because I didn't say a driver. Okay, there we go. Let's see.
You're doing that, Stevie. Explain to me, for the uninitiated like myself, Selenium is a web framework that exists outside of PowerShell, and then there's a
Absolutely.
PowerShell module written to interact with Selenium, written by Adam, right?
Yeah, there's a whole library, and his Selenium module is really just wrapping the C# library.
Yeah.
So if you look at driver equals start C Chrome, and we say headless, that's running now behind the scenes. So if I say driver get member, you can see that there's all of that stuff that he's got exposed as commandlets are actually methods on this OpenQA Selenium iWeb element class. And there's a couple of things in here that aren't quite one-to-one. He's got some more work to do, I think, to make everything come across as a PowerShell commandlet or exposed as a commandlet, so it's a little easier to use. But if you want to do it just with some C# code, you can absolutely just instantiate an instance of this driver and then pass whatever the methods expect to those as well. Whatever.
So
But
when you
still-
say the Selenium is kind of fluky, it's the original web framework. Adam's work on top
Yeah.
is just leveraging that.
yeah,
For those who don't know, Adam Driscoll created a module.
Yeah.
Adam has created some fantastic tools.
yeah, Adam
The
Adam wrote
flakiness is the framework itself.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the flakiness in it comes down to just the weird quirks of testing websites. Like if you're expecting a 10 millisecond response time and for whatever reason there was a cloud over a tree in New Jersey, it took 11 seconds for the site to load. That time your test would fail. That's the kind of annoyances that you're going to have. Or you're running a test, say that you've got Chrome running when you're interactively and you're watching your test run, and then you run the same set of tests again via Pester and it's headless, and all of a sudden 37 of your tests fail because in headless mode it was a different size browser, so the DOM was different because the layout was different, and it clicked the wrong element and that caused a waterfall effect. That's the kind of stuff that you're going to run into. It's unavoidable, and you just kind of have to figure it out as you go. There's no clear-cut answer that, oh, this is what's going on. This is how you fix it. This is what I have going on, and here's 3 ideas of, well, maybe one of these will be the resolution. The very first thing that I say to try is just throw a start sleep around it. If it's purely a timing issue, say start sleep 3 seconds, that should be enough, because 3 seconds is an eternity in a web app. So it should be more than enough time to give that site time to react, and then your test can run and find that element, click that button, input that text, upload that file, whatever you need to do. Now, I think I've got this loaded. Yeah, I do. Somebody, if I can have some audience participation, I need a GitHub username.
JW Moss.
I need a GitHub repo of yours.
Mine. Yeah. I should know this. Do PowerShell _scripts.
Is it public?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Default root, I am going to call it C get.
If you're going to work out of there, can you make it that PowerShell window a little bit bigger?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, this is the only thing I'm gonna run inside of this window. But I can make it a little bigger. So let me see. So based on a GitHub username and the name of the repository, I just had Selenium go out and on the C drive, create this Git folder and clone this PowerShell scripts repository down for me. So if I were to run the same command again now, it's going to say, it should say in this version. Yeah, it's being weird. If you look here, it's, thank you, Chrome WebDriver. Repo's already cloned. Do you want to pull instead? If I just say no, it's going to just tell me that the repo exists and nothing else was to be done, and it closes everything down. So that's one of the things that you can do with Selenium if you want to automate something. So let's have a look at what that actually does. And again, this is a really stupid idea, so that's what I called the file. So I just gave it a couple of parameters. We saw GitHub user, GitHub repo, default root. It defaults to cget. Starting that driver, idempotence for the default root directory. If it doesn't exist, create it, that sort of thing. Again, testing if the GitHub repo already exists. If it does, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to get pull, or do you want me to just go away? And then here's the real meat and potatoes of everything. So we enter the URL of github.com, GitHub user, GitHub repo. We find the clone link button from the little clone, the green clone button. We say click that button, and then we say, well, I want that little copy to clipboard item. So we find that, and then because that actually runs some JavaScript on the back end to actually put it on your clipboard, I want it to run that JavaScript when I click the button. So I say invoke seclick and click that with JavaScript. It does that. And after that, I'm done. So I close down the WebDriver. And then after that, I say, go to that location on disk, that cgit folder, git clone from whatever URL is now in my clipboard, and put me in my shell to that location. And then if you had verbose mode on, it would say fin. So if we were to run that again, and I say git repo, we can do me this time, Steviecoaster, and we'll do vagrant. And I will leave default root off because it's fine. I'll do verbose mode this time. So there we go. So you can see in my shell, now I have that vagrancy module. And if I ls here, there's my vagrancy module cloned down. So there's all kinds of really cool stuff that you can do with Selenium if there's just repetitive tasks in the web that you do all the time, like creating tickets or checking on something and recording a value or whatever. You can absolutely write that stuff as Selenium code and just set it to a scheduled task or run it ad hoc as a function like I've done here. It's powerful enough that you can just write it as a code, and now a 5-minute thing that you had to do because you were going to a browser and going to a web page and clicking a bunch of buttons is now you run a command and you're done. And on the other end of that, we'll take a look at some pester tests next. So what this is going to do, we'll just step down through this pester test real quick. Before all my tests run, I want to import the module, and I want to start a driver. And I'm going to go out to chocolatey.org.packages, and this should work. So I'm saying should not throw. There's going to be a conditions pop-up that comes up, and I want to click that in this case. So I'm going to say, find that button, click it. It shouldn't throw. And then I'm going to search for the Google Chrome package. Same way that we've been doing all night here by the Xpaths. We'll click that search button. There's a copy button that will pop up. I'm going to find that and I'm going to click it. And then I'm going to make sure that my clipboard has Choco install Google Chrome on it. And then after that's done, I'm going to stop that driver because my tests are done. So if we look at this, and let me just let me run it from over here since I'm over here anyways. Invoke pester. Come on. I've ran this once, so hopefully this box thing pops up again. Okay, it did. Very good. Yeah, so as you can see, all my pester tests passed. It was able to open that website. I was able to search for Google Chrome. I was able to click that copy button, and I was able to put it on my clipboard. And then if I wanted to, I could shotgun install Google Chrome now that it's on my clipboard. That's really all I had for content. Like I said, I wanted it to be a really high level introduction and really just introduce you to the tools that you would use to figure out what you were looking for as you started to write your tests, and then also some examples of what you could do with it once you did get started. So if there's any questions at all, now's the time. And it doesn't have to be about Selenium. If you want to ask questions about anything else, I'm more than happy to field those as well.
So in your script and when you're testing is that it's highly dependent upon the website itself. And so if the website itself, does a UI change slightly and they added a new, header to it, and you're like, oh, freaking crap.
Yep,
at this point,
exactly.
they add a new div somewhere and boom, your entire code is bad. Now you got to go figure out what's wrong with it.
Yep, exactly. And that is why Selenium is fragile and finicky and profanity inducing.
So, there may be some ways to try and figure out, or at least do some error handling with all that kind of stuff, but it may be,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I didn't have any error handling in this because I knew going into it that the stuff that I was going to be touching was very static. I knew that it was going to be what it was. If I were to do this in a real life scenario, I would maybe do a couple of things differently. Hopefully, any web dev worth his salt will use IDs, very unique IDs for all of his different things, and then you can just target those IDs rather than an Xpath, for example. And as long as those IDs don't change, they can add divs all day long. But as long as the IDs are different and the ID that you're looking for hasn't changed, your test is still going to pass. Or the element that you're trying to find is still going to be found because you're hunting by ID and the ID hasn't changed.
So when you get an element, can you get, the details of that element, more details of the element? So like you got that element and you just dumped it out, but is it to like log, hey, I grabbed this element at this path. And so then you go back to your old log going, hey, the path changed. Now I know where I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can log all those details if you wanted to. Sure.
So it didn't really come together for me until the last example. I'm like, oh, I see some interesting use cases now.
Yeah.
So for someone who's watching, and this is all new to them, like it is to me, I know you did high level stuff, but you also blessed through some stuff pretty quick because you have some foundational knowledge of this. Where's a good place for someone to start with this stuff?
A good place to start would be definitely just getting the module and figuring out what all it can do. Git command module Selenium. There's all of the different functions that are available to you to get started with. And like I said, Adam doesn't have any docs up on his website or via GitHub for any of this stuff at the minute. I know this is kind of a side project that he just whipped this together and is kind of built on it over time as he's needed it. So PRs would probably be very, very welcome to the repo to help him out and get him some good docs written inside of there. But just start playing around with it. That site that I was using earlier, that the internet.herokuapp.com website has so many different really basic things that you are very, very simple in nature, very simply designed that will help you get started with this. And also, if you just Google search really quick Selenium web testing, there are so many good resources out there for tutorials and training materials and things like that to help you get started.
So would you say that for someone who's trying to tackle this, that they should invest some time with Selenium outside of PowerShell first, or is this something that you can kind of learn in tandem?
I would say learn it in tandem, because under the covers, the language that you use to test it doesn't matter. The foundational concepts of it will help you more than anything. Understand what a DOM is in relation to a website. Understand what all those nodes inside of that DOM mean, and then understand what an XPath is and how that relates to the DOM. And then once you kind of understand that stuff, things like getting those elements just begin to click for you, because you can search by something to find an element. So for example, if you know on the web page that you're on, you have an ID and its name is Bob, you can say get SE element by ID selection Bob, and it will go out to that website. It will find that ID and it will store it in that variable.
Well, I think one of the other things is to certainly use the developer tools to discover what the website you're looking at is and how it was constructed and what the constructs are. And so the example being is like I've had to do some web development, or at least updating exactly, I'm Citrix admin, updating a NetScaler and understanding, oh, they call these classes these and this thing. So on this login screen is this, but there's actually 5 forms behind it. And you can call the other forms in that form, but you need to be able to then use, like I use Chrome to figure out then, oh, what all those elements are. So at this login prompt, I now have these elements available to me. And at those points, these elements are available to me. So if I need to just use CSS, because I'm just using it to rewrite the page in CSS. And so, but this would be a good idea to, kind of see if it's working and possibly even do some other automation in logins. But the idea is that at that point, I needed to dig into here and use this to go. What I actually like to do is just use the selection highlighter at the top there, and then you can just highlight around and go, oh, hover. That's what that's called, right? So if you hover over that and see what it's called, it's the div download button. So you can see what they're called in that little dialog.
Yep.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. So use the tools that are right in front of you to help you. The Chrome web tools, or the developer tools, or the Firefox dev tools, or Edge, or whatever you want to use. The developer tools in there will be extremely helpful in giving you a map of what you're looking for. And as long as you can read the map, you can get where you're going.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve. That was awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're gonna let this ride a little bit. There's been a pretty good discussion going on in the chat. Some guys were throwing out ideas and some questions were being answered. But I do want to take the opportunity to turn it over to people who have been watching, and maybe you just didn't understand something along the way, or you need some clarification on something. Does there anybody have any questions for Mr. Steviecoaster this evening? All right. So I will finish this up by saying thank you again to Steviecoaster for presenting tonight. Awesome stuff. We appreciate the time invested. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to say good night.